Greece is moving to offload a large tranche of legacy heavy artillery to Ukraine in a deal routed through Czechia, a transfer that underscores how Europe is reorganizing dormant Cold War stockpiles to meet Kyiv's immediate battlefield needs. Valued at roughly €199.4 million, the package comprises 60 US-made M110A2s self-propelled howitzers in the 203mm caliber, approximately 150,000 artillery rounds spanning several natures, and a quantity of Zuni rockets from Greek reserves. Athens intends to supply the equipment, as is, without refurbishment, redirecting proceeds into its own modernization priorities, particularly artillery and air defense. Greek officials frame the move as a cost-neutral disposal of surplus assets that no longer align with the Hellenic military's operational standards. The decision follows a review by the Hellenic National Defense General Staff, which categorized the systems as non-essential and increasingly misaligned with Greece's current force design. The heavy 203mm fleet, once central to long-range fire support, has been eclipsed by NATO standard 155mm platforms with greater automation, interoperability, and reduced manpower demands. In committee hearings, the Defense Ministry secured support from the governing party to proceed, while opposition lawmakers registered concerns about removing artillery from the eastern Aegean Islands and sending weapons to an active conflict. Final authorization rests with the Government Council for National Security chaired by the Prime Minister. Once endorsed, Czechia will serve as the logistical intermediary, handling onward transfer to Ukraine and ensuring compliance with European export procedures. At the heart of the package is the M110A2, the last major iteration of America's heavyweight gun howitzer lineage. The A2 variant mounts the 203mm M110A1 on a tracked chassis and incorporates a longer barrel, double-baffle muzzle brake, and recoil upgrades to tolerate higher charge propellants. The platform's statistics reflect brute delivery trade-offs, about 28 tons in combat trim, a Detroit diesel 8V71T delivering roughly 400 horsepower, and a road speed in the mid-50s, km/h. Armor is minimal, intended to defeat fragments and small arms fire rather than direct hits. Traverse is limited, elevation generous, and the system is fundamentally manual, emphasizing payload and range at the expense of automation, crew comfort, and sustained tempo. Operationally, the M110A2's cadence is modest but consequential given the caliber. Crews can achieve bursts of 3 rounds in 2 minutes before settling into a sustained rate near 1 round per minute. Each projectile weighs around 90 kilograms and is loaded separately from its propellant increments, necessitating a large crew, typically 13+ dedicated ammunition vehicles. Conventional high-explosive rounds reach into the low to mid-20s in kilometers, while rocket-assisted projectiles can extend that envelope to roughly 30 kilometers. Barrel life, hydraulics, and recoil systems are well documented from decades of service, but the platform's labor intensity, maintenance burden, and limited digital integration made it a prime candidate for retirement in modern NATO forces. For Ukraine, the package expands a niche it already exploits through the legacy Soviet 2S7 and 2S7M 203mm systems. The M110A2 is not a leap in sophistication, its value lies in massed heavy payloads, predictable ballistic behavior, and the injection of additional launcher tubes into a theater dominated by counter-battery duels. The ammunition mix enhances flexibility from day one. Standard high-explosive rounds support area suppression and demolition tasks, while HERA rocket-assisted projectiles push range for standoff engagements against batteries and hardened nodes. The inclusion of cluster munitions, specifically ICM and DPICM types, adds wide area effects against personnel and light material, reflecting Greece's status outside the convention on cluster munitions and mirroring earlier Western choices to prioritize battlefield outcomes over normative constraints. The as-is transfer accelerates timelines but pushes integration risk onto the recipient. Vehicles and ammunition drawn from storage will require inspection, cannibalization, and selective overhaul to generate reliable combat availability. Ukraine will need to adapt training pipelines for crews, commanders, and maintainers, while building out spares, recoil seals, hydraulic components, and engine part stockpiles. Ammunition handling, safety protocols, and fuse management must be harmonized with existing procedures for Soviet-derived 203mm systems to avoid parallel logistics that sap efficiency. None of this is insurmountable, but it is resource-intensive. The net effect will depend on how quickly Kiev can spin up maintenance and marry the guns to its existing sensor-to-shooter architecture. Tactically, the M110A2 offers value in roles where range and payload trump agility, deliberate counter-battery fires cued by UAVs and counter-battery radars, destruction of fixed fortifications, and the methodical reduction of logistics nodes. The system's lack of armor and relatively low traverse place a premium on survivability techniques, shoot-and-scoot patterns, pre-surveyed alternate positions, strict emissions control, and camouflage. When paired with Western ISR feeds and digital fire mission workflow, even a manual heavy howitzer can deliver temporally precise fires, compensating for slower handling with better targeting and synchronized sequence of fires across batteries and echelons. Politically, Athens is signaling two priorities: aligning with Euro-Atlantic efforts to sustain Ukraine's firepower and monetizing sunk-cost assets to fund its own modernization. The Hellenic stance that readiness is unaffected rests on the judgment that the aging 203mm inventory no longer fits Greece's operational problem set, which emphasizes integrated air defense, maritime security, and rapidly deployable fires within a NATO context. The parliamentary debate shows that even surplus disposals can be contentious when they touch sensitive geographies like the Eastern Aegean. Routing the transfer through Czechia reduces bureaucratic friction and ensures auditability, a growing concern as European capitals balance domestic politics with wartime assistance. Legal and ethical frictions will focus on the cluster munitions component. Europe remains divided on their use, but the battlefield logic is clear to militaries confronting entrenched positions and massed infantry assaults. For Ukraine, which has already employed cluster effects from multiple sources, the addition of 203mm ICM and DPICM extends the menu of options. The political cost will be managed through messaging about target discrimination, deconfliction with civilian areas, and post-conflict remediation, areas where critics argue assurances often lag reality. Nonetheless, the decision reflects the wartime trade-off calculus already visible in prior transatlantic transfers. From an alliance perspective, the deal illustrates how NATO members are rebalancing inventories to extract residual utility from mothballed platforms. Greece retains optionality in other domains, air power foremost, yet officials depict any future aircraft transfers as separate from this artillery package. The real signal to partners is procedural: define surplus, monetize quickly, and reinvest in capabilities aligned with contemporary threats. For states with deep storage lots, that template can add incremental capacity to Ukraine without undercutting their own frontline formations. The strategic question is whether 60 additional 203mm launchers and 6 figures of ammunition materially shift the artillery ledger. Alone, the answer is no. Warfare at this scale consumes munitions at a rate that dwarfs discrete donations. In combination with other deliveries, and coupled to Ukraine's continued expansion of reconnaissance strike complexes, the effect is meaningful. Heavy artillery remains the arbiter of attrition in the east, and the capacity to inflict sustained, long-range damage complicates Russian planning and forces the dispersion of assets across a wider depth. The Greek transfer, if rapidly integrated and maintained, nudges the balance by adding reach, volume, and options at a moment when all three remain at a premium. Ultimately, the transaction trades Greek maintenance liabilities for Ukrainian firepower at the cost of integration work and political debate. If Kiev can absorb the guns fast, keep them running, and plug them into a targeting network that extracts value from every round, the M110A2s will punch above their age. If not, they risk becoming another storage and spares challenge on a battlefield already straining to sustain complex fleets. The calculus from Athens to Prague to Kiev is that the balance tilts toward utility, that a warehouse of heavyweight guns is more valuable in action than on blocks, and that modernization at home can be financed by returning retired metal to the fight.